You might think that with over 35 years of crocheting and over 15 years of knitting experience, I would have worked out all of my bad habits, but I have to confess, there are still 10 habits I struggle to break. And if you stick around till the end of the video, I will share with you all of my tips to help combat some of the effects of what I think is probably the most important but worst habit that I have, that you might have. I'm sure you might be expecting that one of the worst habits that's out there in the knitting and crocheting community is just not swatching. Actually, I don't swatch. As long as the size of the finished project does not matter, and I am confident that I have more than enough yarn to get through the project. So if I am making a garment where size matters, I do take the time to swatch, and often I do make a swatch larger than the little 4-inch square or whatever. And you may have even noticed that in a past video when I talked about making the larger swatch for the grayling sweater. But the flip side of that is I do have a tendency to over purchase on yarn. And I know it is recommended to make sure you have definitely enough yarn, especially in a particular dye lot, to make sure you can complete your project. But I know one of my bad habits is just going a little bit too far and purchasing just enough extra that I have these weird amounts left over, maybe enough to make a hat, maybe not, maybe enough to make a hat and some other random scraps. It's just something I feel like I'm always going to struggle with to a certain extent, because I have been in the situation where I wanted to make something, and when I looked at what was in my stash, I might be 1 or 2 skeins short of it, and it would have just been nice to know that I would have the extra yardage. So I tend to, when I am purchasing a larger quantity of yarn, go a little bit overboard, which isn't the worst habit, but then I just have all of these weird random amounts left over. It also does not help that at 5'11", I often want to make sure I have enough for making sure my sleeves are long enough. This is a store-bought sweater, so the sleeves are not going to be quite long enough. Same for the length if I want to add any length. I'm also not a cropped sweater person or cropped anything person, so I always make sure I just, out of an abundance of caution, will have that extra yarn, and at some point I am going to have to figure out what to do with all of those weird leftover quantities, whether I end up donating them, gifting them, selling them off, I don't know yet, but I feel like that's a problem for 2026, Holly. Related to that, my second worst habit when it comes to knitting and crocheting is not storing my yarn very well. And this is something I feel like I've always struggled with to some extent. And most recently, my issue has been I had a storage solution that worked until it didn't. And now I'm stuck in this limbo of trying to figure out what the most perfect, for me, storage solution is for all of my yarn, wanting to make sure that it is easily accessible. I can look at it at a glance and just see, what do I have? What inspires me? What could I make on any given day with what I have in my stash? And I think I finally have come across a potential solution, and I'm hoping I can pull it together. But I do feel like for at least the last 6 months or so, my yarn has not been stored well. It's been shoved in closets that aren't my yarn storage area. It's been left in the boxes that they were shipped in, the poly mailers that they were shipped in, shoved in an extra box. I have yarn everywhere. It's just so out of control, and it bothers me because not being able to see it it makes me forget the things that I have, and I want to get better at it. So that is a goal for this year. And I don't understand how February has just already been flying by, and I don't know when this project is going to happen, but I definitely want to get to it soon. But at least I finally have an idea what I want to do with my yarn. So hopefully we can sort it and organize it together, and it will all work out in the end. Another bad habit I've had lately is kind of abusing my Ravelry queue. And what I mean by that is just seeing something I like, and instead of favoriting it for later and then deciding later to look through all of my favorites of like pullovers or cardigans or amigurumi or whatever the case may be, instead of going after that when I actually want to start something, I've gotten really bad about just adding stuff to my queue because, I'm just so sure that I'm going to want to make this thing, and then I'll change my mind, and now I have pages and pages and pages in my Ravelry queue of stuff that, to be honest, I'm not going to get to it all. And that is a goal for March, is to do a spring cleaning of my Ravelry queues. I guess that's going into my next bad habit, which is not liking and subscribing. Oh no, wait, no, I do like and subscribe. So maybe you just need to check to see that you're liking and subscribing the video, so that way you can join me in March when I go through my Ravelry queue, and you can open up your Ravelry queue, and we're going to make decisions and be ruthless and make sure that everything in our Ravelry queues are things that we are actually going to get to and that we have yarn allocated for, or at least that we know we want to purchase. Like, decisions will be made. We're going to do this. So like and subscribe, and of course, go ahead and hit the notification bell if you want to be the first one to know the next time I upload a video. Speaking of Ravelry, one of my bad habits that I am trying to get out of is I had a bad habit, if you couldn't tell, when I went through all of my old whips and things that were not completely finished. That is marking off projects as completed and finished, even though the ends were not woven in, the sewing wasn't done, and the project was not blocked. So that's something I need to work on, and I'm going to get better at and make sure all of those little finishing tasks and details and buttons and anything that needs to go on a finished project to be able to use it in the way that it is intended to be used is done before I mark it complete, and then I can actually enjoy it. And then it just doesn't sit in my closet for years with all the ends hanging out and being completely useless, even though I've made it and now I don't get to enjoy it. So we're going to get better at it. Bad habit number 6 is thinking that I am going to make changes to a project and just remember what those changes are and adjustments, but not actually write any notes down. And the irony of this is I actually had all of my bad habits jotted down somewhere and I lost them, which I think also sometimes happens. So I'm not effectively writing my notes where they belong on the pattern. And I'm pretty sure all of the bad habits that I brainstormed before were jotted down on a pattern and were not helpful because it's not where I reference when I want to make a YouTube video. So much irony in that bad habit. I don't even know what to do with it. It's just something to be aware of so I can try to get better and make notes where notes make sense. Similarly in tone is thinking I can just keep going and working more rows and rounds without marking them off, and thinking I'm going to remember how many rows and rounds I've done and then mark them off later, but then I'll set the project down and then I won't work on it for a few days or a week or weeks or months or years at a time apparently, and then I'm going to go back to it and then not know what the heck I was doing and have to like sit there and like count where I'm at and figure it all out. I've gotten a lot better recently at just taking the time to like pause what I'm doing, jot with my little pencil or pen. And even then there's times where recently I have caught myself turning the row and getting halfway across and being like, I don't know if I just marked this row off. Oh no. So it is a work in progress to improve, but I'm getting there. Number 8 is stealing needles or hooks from one project to start a new project. Because, you know, why finish that project when I could start a new project or start swatching for a new project? But then also I convinced myself I'm going to remember what size needle or hook I was using for the first project. And then I don't know. I really struggle with that sort of stuff. And I think by doing my big whip down challenge and getting all of the whips as much as possible off the hooks and needles from projects past is getting it down to a much more manageable number of whips in my rotation. I think I was probably the most successful and consistent at stuff when I kept about 3 projects on the needles or so. So that's a goal that I want to work on so that way, you know, I have enough going on that there's a little bit of variety. And if I want a mindless project or one that's a little bit more of a pay attention moment or one that's easy to travel with and, you know, go to a knit night or something like that, that's my eventual goal for this year. So I think by getting my projects down to about 3 or 4 going on at any given time is really going to help get that habit under control and a lot more manageable in the future. With all of the experience that I have, so many years of experience, you would think that I would learn by now to read all of the pattern notes before I start a project And I can assure you that doesn't always happen. So even if you're a beginner going, oh no, I keep making these mistakes and missing instructions and not knowing what's going on, like, listen, I have problems reading. I don't know what it is. There's something about, even the last time I tried to read all the project notes at the beginning, like, it felt like garbledy-gook because I wasn't doing it. And I was just like, in la la land and not paying attention to what's on the page in front of me. So I don't know what to do with that other than just making sure I always have the pages of pattern notes with me as I'm going along, and doing my best to at least try to see if there's anything that's like a red flag or even a yellow flag of like, slow down when I get to a certain point. I can't count how many times I've had to rip back because I missed something in the overall project notes, or even just on a row or round that I'm working on where it's like, I don't know, I just thought I knew what the next row was going to be, so I did it, and then when it doesn't line up, I'm like, why isn't this lining up? And then I take the time to, fully read it all the way through and figure out where I was the problem on it. All that to say is, it doesn't matter how much experience you have or do not have, mistakes will be made. I don't know, I feel like it's something that I'm still going to run into from time to time, and it's just a symptom of being human at this point. Also, in being human, number 10 is probably my worst habit. The absolute worst habit. I know it's the worst habit. Everyone always talks about this is the worst thing you can do as a crocheter or a knitter, and I'm still going to do it, and I'm not going to fix it, and I don't know how to explain what is wrong with me, that I'm not going to fix this. All I can do is come up with ways to mitigate that, and that is having terrible posture, sitting not ergonomically correct at all for long stretches of time, for knitting and crocheting for long stretches of time, and ignoring when I feel a little bit of a pull or a twinge in my back or my wrists, and not taking breaks when I'm supposed to be taking breaks. And if this is something you also struggle with, and yes, I know I should be sitting more properly, and maybe you don't have a conducive chair, or you're like me, you have a nice, like, well broken in couch that's nice and comfy to lean off this way, or tuck your legs under you, or whatever the case may be. Or also knitting or crocheting for too long until your wrists are a little bit uncomfortable, or your fingers. Obviously, the best thing would be to, sit properly. But since I've already accepted that that's probably not going to happen as often as I should, I have gotten a lot better about just making sure, like, if I'm getting up for a snack, refilling my beverage, whatever the case may be, just making sure I'm taking a little bit of time and, stretching, and then stretching, doing all of the little things that will help add up in the end, making sure I'm doing some shoulder rolls, things like that. I do keep my walking pad out and in the open, so that is something else that can help, is just hop on there and do some walking, even if it's for just 5 minutes. That really does help your body kind of reset out of being all slumpy and hunched over, because, like, I'm just bad about that, to be honest. And just making sure I am taking those little bit of moving breaks when it makes sense. Also, the other thing I have been trying to get better at incorporating, and I know there's room for improvement and obviously add more in, is doing any sort of weight training will help you get your posture in check a little bit, and your body will naturally want to have better posture, assuming you're lifting weights with, good posture. So make sure you do check with your doctor or, someone at your gym or whatever the case may be before you, make it worse by injuring yourself in the gym. But I have noticed that even doing some weightlifting does help with that. Also, again, check with your doctor. One movement I learned years ago, and this was on, I think it was like an episode of The Doctors or something, where they were talking about how teens are really bad about looking down at their phones all the time, and then they create this, well, now they were calling it tech neck. But honestly, it's knitting and crocheting neck, or gardening neck, or woodworking neck, or whatever your hobby is. Most of our hobbies are down here. I have taken to where I will lay on the couch, or you could do it at the edge of the bed to where your shoulders are lined up with the very edge and your head is hanging off the back like this, and trying to reintroduce that curve, because there should be a curve in the neck portion of your spine. So certainly make sure it's something that you physically can do and you're not going to injure yourself, but it is something that I feel really helps me out a lot. And the other thing is, I do have my screens. I actually have my computer screens. Like, I'm currently holding my arm at the angle where my computer screens are mounted to the wall. My TVs are mounted just a little bit higher than what we would traditionally hang them on the wall, even to where my dad, who is 6'6", was kind of like, those are kind of high. And I'm like, that's by design, because, you should be looking up more. In a perfect world, outside of, sitting properly, I would go to the chiropractor regularly and make sure everything is still being in alignment. It currently is not in my budget, and because I'm not experiencing any chronic pain or acute pain or anything like that, it is not covered by insurance, unfortunately. So if you do have the budget, or you have HSA, FSA money that you can put towards a good, reputable chiropractor, that is probably one of the best ways to help mitigate all of these sorts of things in the long run. And I will get there. It's just, things are just a little bit too tight for me right now. That's just a perfect world situation for now, because I have gone to the chiropractor in the past and learned some of these tips and tricks. I thought I would pass them along to you and just make sure I am also incorporating them so I can keep knitting and crocheting for many, many years to come. I would love to hear what your bad habits are, if there's anything you're willing to do to, fix those bad habits, or if you've accepted that some of them are just who you are as a knitter or crocheter and you're totally okay with that. And of course, if you want to see the unhinged amount of works in progress that I had at the beginning of 2025, I can't wait to hang out with you over here. But if you already saw it and you want to see the latest update and how many I have completed since the beginning of the year, I'll visit with you more right over here.